Hello again. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, and today we're going to be doing an interview with the CEO and founder, co-founder, I suppose, of LBRY, LBRY. So basically what this is a decentralized YouTube alternative. So if you are a content creator or you want to be a content creator and you are concerned about YouTube's hypocrisy or any other platform's hypocrisy, this may be an option for you because since it's a decentralized platform, there is no central administration. So basically, you can kind of sort of put up almost anything you want and nobody can do anything about it. If you don't want to worry about sponsorship rules and advertising rules and whether you can say this or that or the other thing, LBRY LBRY may be the solution for you. So before we get into it, I do have to talk about our sponsors because they do pay the bills. We have Veeam, Veeam, free backup for PCs, VMs, and Linux, all at veeam.com. DevMountain. DevMountain is a 12-week web development, iOS, and UX design bootcamp intended to get you a job, full-time job in the industry. Learn to code at devmountain.com. INE specializes in network training with hands-on labs, on-site bootcamps, and a focus on delivering the best in online networking courses. INE.com. Schoolie Mitchell. Schoolie Mitchell's purpose is to increase clients' profit by reducing telecom costs using software and process at no risk. We only share savings. SchoolieMitchell.com. Plixer. With the scrutinizer and flow data, users can determine what traffic is on the network, who is originating the traffic, and who's receiving it. Plixer.com. And finally, Gilware Data Recovery. Gilware's partner programs help computer repair and IT professionals make money by offering data recovery services to their customers. Gilware.com. As I say, do not care if you thumb up, thumb down, leave a comment, or subscribe. But if you could click on the sponsorship links below, that would be highly appreciated. And with that, let's jump into this interview because I think it is a very, very interesting concept, very interesting product, and it's very topical for this point in time. So I'm here with Jeremy Kauffman, CEO and co-founder of LBRY, spelled, of course, how all these startup companies do weird fucking spelling. It's LBRY if you're interested. And basically, as I understand, what they're doing is a decentralized, sort of, kind of version of YouTube. So we're going to be talking with him today and get an idea of his company and this product and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
So,
thanks for having me, Eli. I'm excited to be here. The
yes,
company was inspired by Grizzle, so we like to get all those vowels out of there.
Grizzle.
Uh,
What was Grizzle? I don't remember
it's
Grizzle.
from, it's from Parks and Rec. There's the startup
Oh,
when Aziz's character, I forget his name, had the company and were the startup and they were being ridiculous. There, it's called Grizzle. I'm pretty sure.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you folks do marketing, like, cause it sounds so good on paper, and then you're like, yeah, I'll go to that website, and then you're like, yeah, I tried for like 3 hours. It's like, no, you don't spell it that way. You spell it this way. But
Right,
anyways,
right.
so I guess this is topical for me actually, because a couple of hours ago I actually did a video on why I supported a certain political candidate in the presidential cycle, and I'm now getting lambasted to high hell and back on YouTube. And so there is this new movement now of trying to get away from YouTube and trying to get away from like centralized media platforms. And so that's one of the reasons I'm interested in learning more about your product and trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I think library is very relevant to that. I mean, to
Yeah.
be clear, library is a technology. It's not a political project, but
Yeah.
I think that one of the downsides of the centralization we see in the services that we use on the internet is that these companies end up having a lot of control over the conversation. The people who run these companies do tend to be, let's say, on the left for whatever good that spectrum does us in assessing people,
Yeah.
and they, I don't think it's this necessarily grand conspiracy, but your biases can't help come into play.
Yeah.
It's human nature, and so we see things like the way that Twitter handles its hashtags, the way Facebook handles its news stories, and the way that certain types of content gets doesn't get treated the same way as other types of content.
Yeah.
And library is definitely a reaction to that.
So then, what exactly is like? Because we were talking about this before the interview, and so when I go to the library site, the LBRY site, it seems like kind of like a desktop app. But then you're like, no, it's a protocol. And then you're
Right.
like, but it's a fat protocol. I was like, oh, so what is
Oh
it?
boy, yeah, that's right. So I try to, you've got some smart listeners, so I probably won't hold back too much. I mean, so if we get into it, how does library work? What's all this stuff do? I mean, sometimes you can get lost in the weeds. At the end of the day, what library is trying to deliver is the ability for people to find and access and potentially purchase stuff that they like,
Okay.
and to do it in a way that leaves the people who make stuff and the people who look at stuff in control of that and not having someone in the middle.
Okay.
When we get into the specifics of that, yeah, technically speaking, library is a protocol. So a
Okay.
protocol is a standard. It's an open implementation. It's HTTP, BitTorrent. These things are
Yeah.
But if you're inventing a new protocol, you can't just use a protocol. You got to have the first browser. So we've kind of simultaneously created the library protocol and the first library, client.
Oh, I see. Okay. So then what, I mean, we're talking about protocol. I mean, it is 2016. I mean, aren't we like tripping over protocols? Like, why wouldn't you use BitTorrent or Christ FTP? Like, what's different about the protocol?
Well, so BitTorrent is a wonderful technology, and there are aspects of how library works that are directly, let's use the word inspired by BitTorrent.
Yeah.
But BitTorrent also has some downsides.
Okay.
The three biggest ones that I see downsides with BitTorrent are um, one, it's decentralized, but the catalog, there's no catalog, right?
Yeah.
So how do I find what's available on BitTorrent? This is a big problem. And
Yeah.
if you try to look for content on BitTorrent, you'll end up on some very shady websites that you would never recommend that anyone go to.
Yeah.
In the middle part, and part of the reason that that's the case is that there's lots of infringement on BitTorrent. Now, library, we don't want the outcome with library to be the same as it has been with BitTorrent. Library is designed to have a set of incentives that encourages legitimate uses of library
Okay.
as well.
Yeah.
And then the third problem with BitTorrent is the incentive problem. I mean, I think it's wonderful that BitTorrent works as well as it does, but it basically requires people, being nice. And while library supports you being nice, we want you to contribute to the network and host free content. It also provides a set of incentives that we think create a better result, right? Content on BitTorrent, it disappears, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If content, BitTorrent's great for popular stuff, but for unpopular stuff, it disappears, and that's a problem of the incentives that BitTorrent provides.
Interesting. Okay. So then, okay, so you actually have a product up that uses the protocol. So explain that beta product that's up, and like how would I use that right now today?
If you download the library client, which
Okay.
right now that is if you go onto our website, you can there's a get page to download it. It does ask you to enter your email. It's a little bit gated. If you're a clever person who knows where source code might be located, you
Yeah.
could probably find the binaries. We're not hiding them that hard,
Yeah.
but quite frankly, it's more of a proof of concept. We're more interested in getting people interested in the idea. If you download and run library, it's it's probably a terrible thing for a CEO to say, but like it's not going to change your life right now, right? It shows that this is possible,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's what we're seeing with the people who use it is it's not habit changing. So we're still debugging it, we're still making it work better,
Okay.
but it works. You can download it, you can access content on there, you can search the network, you can stream a piece of content from someone else
Okay.
that someone else has published. You're actually streaming it from multiple people, not just from one person.
Yeah.
But it works in an entirely decentralized way, in a way that we ourselves have no authority over this. You can discover, access, and potentially purchase a piece of digital content published by anyone else in the world. And we've actually got some stuff on there already. Oscilloscope Laboratories is one of our early partners, which is a Hollywood studio. One of our launch pieces of content was a film with David Cross and Julia Stiles called "It's a Disaster." So we have been getting traction from this thing. There are a lot of people out there who think that the status quo is not benefiting them.
Okay. So I download the app, and then I guess that's a question. Do I upload a video to this thing? And if I do, what am I actually uploading to?
Yeah. Good questions. So if you publish via library, what
Yeah.
actually happens is the standard model is that's going to get encrypted.
Okay.
It's going to get broken up into a bunch of tiny chunks, about a megabyte each. And then that content gets kind of like scattered around on all of the different computers that are running the software.
Okay.
So what happens is, and this is actually when I talk about some of the incentive problems that library solves, people who donate their disk space and their bandwidth to the library network,
Yeah.
they actually can make a little bit of money for that. So that disk space and that bandwidth that's not going to any use, no one has a full hard drive, no one's using their internet connection all the time.
Yeah.
You run the library software, you plug that computer into the network, you're contributing to the network itself working, and you earn a little bit for doing that.
Interesting. So then you say you encrypt it, and I guess nowadays the buzzword is you fucking encrypt everything.
All right, yeah.
Is there actually a reason why you're encrypting for this?
So you don't have to encrypt, and if you want your content to be maximally available, publishing in the clear is supported.
Okay.
The encryption is, we do want creators to get paid, and it facilitates creators getting paid.
Oh, I see. So the encryption is part of the whole payment scheme then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So then, okay, so I upload my content. It gets turned into 1 meg. Is there a reason for the 1 meg, just for the technical people out there?
It's fairly arbitrary, and it's not actually fixed in size. That's more just the default behavior. Basically, it's getting chunked and encrypted.
Okay.
And another upside to that is, you're running your disk space, you're donating your disk space and your bandwidth. That computer is it's kind of anonymously seeing that
Hmm.
this data is popular, but it doesn't know what's inside of it. It just knows that this 1 megabyte chunk
Yeah.
that's part of something larger sure does seem to be popular right now.
Okay.
And so your computer can dynamically use its resources to host that stuff, and it doesn't need to worry about, well, what is that? What's inside of that? It's just an anonymous chunk of data.
So yeah,
So,
okay. So I guess that's one of the questions with a lot of this file sharing and people getting their butts sued off. When I share out my folder on my computer, does it actually ever contain an entire file? Or is it only like bits o 1,000 files?
it could, and particularly if you published it, then by the default behavior there is to make the whole thing available.
Okay.
If you're just running it, if your computer's just kind of algorithmically trying to make money, there's no guarantee that it won't contain a whole file, but it probably wouldn't.
Okay.
Um, the and in terms of file sharing has become a bit of a dirty word. Library does support sharing, but it's also we don't want this to be the outcome of a lot of these other services. We want library to be something that is used in very, very legitimate ways, that is used by creators like yourself. Like Eli, you make a part of your living off of YouTube, I assume.
Yeah.
We want you to keep getting paid. We actually want you to get paid more. I don't know if you know how much YouTube is taking of every dollar, but it's
Yeah.
about 45%.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
every dollar you're making for YouTube's keeping about half of it, which
Yeah.
is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the files get up, they get chunked. So how many copies of a file would exist on the network? Probably.
No, that's going to be proportional to how popular the content is.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so the more popular the content is, the more copies you would expect to exist, and the hard numbers depend on the total numbers of nodes running and that kind of thing.
Okay. And then so yeah, because the problem with BitTorrent and a lot of these other things is the question is always, everybody always talks about centralization, but there's always that weakest link. At some point, there does just have to be some central, whether it's a catalog or whatever it is. So you're saying with your thing, there is nothing centralized?
Well, that's the power of a blockchain, and that's
Okay.
really the problem that blockchain has solved. Now, blockchain gets a lot of hype. I think there's a lot of I think you've already cursed, so I can say there's a lot of bullshit
Yeah.
around blockchain.
Yeah.
Um, But if there's a problem that blockchain solves, it's how do I maintain this set of data? A database. A blockchain is a database. That's the way I try to tell people to think about it. Blockchain is a database. So,
Yeah.
and that's what a listing is. It's a
Okay.
database.
Okay.
So a blockchain allows us to have a database that is consistent across all users,
Hmm.
that doesn't require a central authority.
Okay.
That's the innovation of Bitcoin and blockchain. Bitcoin isn't money.
Yeah.
Money is an application
Yeah.
that blockchain serves. You know,
Okay.
so Bitcoin is like a decentralized bank.
Yeah.
It's an application that uses the blockchain as a database to keep track of balances and accounts.
Yeah.
We can also use a blockchain to keep track of, well, what content's on the network, and this solves what I would call the catalog problem
Okay.
that BitTorrent has.
So, but then when you initially start up your client for the first time, how does it know?
Ah, so yes, there is bootstrapping, but that's true even with BitTorrent. When you run a BitTorrent client for the first time, it
Yeah.
calls to a specific IP address that BitTorrent Inc.
Okay.
controls,
Oh,
that
okay.
that points you to the rest of the network.
Okay.
And if you drill down to any of these services, even
Yeah.
DNS, the name system of the internet, if
Yeah.
you drill down low enough, it turns out that there are 13 root providers of DNS,
Yeah.
and it has to know about at least some of those for the internet to work. So these decentralized systems do frequently still require some bootstrap point. That's true for Bitcoin as well. There's a bootstrap. There's a bootstrap now.
Okay. So, but then that central point with you folks, though, that's only to say where the other servers are. That doesn't
Yeah.
contain a catalog itself, or
Yeah, exactly. It points you to a couple of other nodes, and then those nodes know about other nodes. But when you first run that software, it does need to.
yeah,
Well, who can I ask first?
yeah,
And that could be anyone. So even if our other people could provide that service, if for whatever reason we were no longer capable, it's just you just need to get pointed somewhere that can tell you. They tell you about a couple more, and then they
yeah,
tell you
yeah.
about a couple more, and so on.
So how long would you figure? Because I mean, that's one thing. Like everybody always forgets with databases and all that is this whole fucking the replication process.
Yeah.
So let's say, like right now, obviously you don't have a lot of stuff, but you know, let's say you are a YouTube competitor in 5 years and you
Yeah.
have a billion videos. The first time I would connect to the system, how long would it take before I would be able to actually be able to search for all those videos and know where they are?
Oh, well, so you don't actually have to have a local copy of the blockchain to be able to access content on the library network. If you
Okay.
want to do really rich searching, you may, or you may use search providers. You may use other, the nice thing is that database is agreed upon and can be used by anyone. So anyone can provide search results. Anyone can use that database. They don't need to ask permission to get a copy of it.
Uh,
So, however, if you just want to go to a URL, so
mhm.
library is ultimately a URL scheme. That's why we, as much fun as we can have about the lack of vowels in library, and the reason we wanted a short name is because we library is a URL scheme like HTTP is. So LBRY colon slash slash at Eli the computer guy would
Huh.
be the most likely URL for your channel. Or
Yeah.
maybe you could get just at Eli.
Yeah.
It's the early days. So.
Okay. Well, I guess then that's the question. How does that naming get resolved? Is it just a free for all? Is it just a land grab at this point?
So it depends on the kind of name that you're talking about. When it comes to usernames in particular, there will be a verification process where you have to prove you own that property on some other channels so that it's not a land grab.
Yeah.
Uh, we think it's a mistake to support just first come, buy it, and you own it because that leads to all of this. A lot of the problems with the existing DNS system stem from that, right?
Yeah.
If you go to lbry.com,
Yeah.
it's not our website. It's not being used for anything useful. And we would have to spend, 50 grand to buy that.
Yeah. Okay.
So but what value did that person add to the world by getting there first? They didn't add any value.
Yeah.
So, to allow people to race out and grab the names and hold them forever just because they got there first, I think it's a silly system.
All right.
And those people, they don't add any value to the world.
Yeah.
They're not adding any value to the world. So it's a broken way of doing it.
Okay. So then, do they buy that from you, or they request it from you?
So we support a couple of different ways. The username system, we're still actually figuring that out a little bit, but it's most likely going to be prove that you own it in some other place. So if
Okay.
you have the YouTube handle, if you have the Twitter handle, if you have the whatever other handle, then we'll reserve it for you for up to like 2 years or something.
Yeah.
We're still that part is a little bit up in the air.
Yeah.
There will definitely you can get a random ID type publishing system
Okay.
that you own forever.
Yeah.
You can have disambiguation around a URL. So in other words, say you claimed Eli first,
Yeah.
and then later I also wanted Eli. You could be Eli, kind of like again. There's some of this is still being worked out, but something like Eli pound one,
Okay.
or something like that. So you were the first person to get Eli.
Yeah. Yeah.
The names themselves. So what we're calling vanity names. So the just an English word
Mhm.
that will be done by a continual. It's kind of like an auction,
Hmm.
but it's essentially, or it's kind of like voting. Another way to think of it is kind of like voting.
Okay.
Every user of the system has credits. Those credits are a vote towards how a URL should resolve.
Oh, I see.
So if most people in the network think that Eli should return your channel, then that's what will be returned.
Okay.
If most people don't, then it will return something else, but you would still have Eli plus a unique differentiator or Eli pound one or some other ways of still getting Eli in that name.
Okay. Are you worried with that though? Like they're talking about that, like with the Bitcoin mining, where the Chinese just jumped in and they just fucking they deploy like 10,000 servers and now they own all the Bitcoin just because so like because like when you say you get the votes. That sounds really good until you think about somebody dropping 50 grand and saying, I want to control this.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is, it's something that I really, really want to emphasize is like it's just a fundamentally really difficult problem. How do we get these URLs into the people's hands that we all intuitively have the sense of this person deserves it, right?
Yeah.
But in this intuitive sense is not an algorithm. It's
Yeah.
not something that computer code is not going to understand human intuition.
Yeah.
So, we did spend a lot of time thinking about this. We consulted with economists on this. It's something that we did put a lot of thought into, and our we think that there's a lot of theory that says that this will result in names being the most likely to return what people want. But the other fact of this is it's not really necessary. You know,
Yeah.
your YouTube videos don't have a memorable URL.
Yeah.
People access your YouTube videos by going to your channel, which you would have and you would own forever,
Yeah.
or they access your videos by searching and finding it, which would still work regardless of the URL. So this particular part of the system did actually pretty much been the most controversial aspect of it. I don't know if you're bringing this up because you did your homework a little bit, but this has been a little controversial. We still think that for that particular problem, it's the best solution. But what's really important to remember is permanent URLs exist,
Yeah.
channels will be permanent, and even short permanent URLs will exist. So that it's only for these, vanity names that are in no way necessary will they potentially not be permanent.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's curious then. So then, since you're using the LBRY colon slash slash, like what does it take to get that into like the DNS settings, so like SIP or FTP or something like that?
So it's actually your operating system that handles that,
Oh,
and
okay.
that since I'm a nerd who can't help being pedantic, it's technically called a scheme.
Yeah.
So that first part of a URL is called the scheme, and that tells your operating system this is the protocol or the method that I want to use to request this. And actually, anyone can create a scheme.
Yeah.
And if you've installed a bit of software on the operating system that says use this program or use this bit of code to execute this scheme,
Yeah.
then actually anyone can do that.
Huh.
And so once you've installed a piece of code on your operating system, you can actually access library URLs in your web browser.
Okay, that's interesting. So is there a program then, like with browsers, Google or Firefox, like once you get so many users, or can you throw 200 grand on the table? Like how would you get that implemented in a Firefox if you wanted to?
There's probably an amount of there's possibly an amount of money that would do it. It would be a lot more than 200 grand. The
Oh,
real way to do it is to get people using your software and using your product.
yeah.
And if that becomes popular, then they're much more likely to adopt it and add support for it.
Okay. Okay, so then we're talking about the payments and getting money, and so that's part of the encryption. So explain how does money work into this? Like how do yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we basically there's the payment system is also decentralized. It uses library credits, which is also another. It's similar to Bitcoin. It's a decentralized way of exchanging these tokens,
Yeah.
and so people can exchange these tokens to pay one another for content without relying on us as a middleman in those exchanges. And then those tokens can then be converted to something that you would probably care a lot more about, like United States dollars,
Yeah.
or whatever your currency of choice would be. You can get Bitcoin or other things. So basically, library credits are kind of like the rails. They're kind of the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah.
But ultimately, people will be able to put in dollars and get dollars out because that's what people actually want.
Is that something you're going to be running, or is it going to be like Bitcoin where there's exchanges and God knows
Yeah,
what's going on?
so I spent an unfortunate amount of time on this problem. The United States government is not too keen about people's ability to buy tokens on the internet and allow people to exchange them with one another. So
Yeah.
some aspects of this are still being pieced out. Right now, we rely on third-party services because that's basically the only legal way we can do it. For us to legally, it's crazy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we're not trying to trick people. We're happy to be very straightforward about what they're buying and all of this stuff, but the law is that we, as I understand it, that we basically probably cannot sell credits directly to people. That not without going through a whole bunch of hoops that would cost us several $100,000 to comply with.
You can't just do
So
PayPal and that gives you a
it's not
thousand credits and
it's
whatever.
not allowed. The reason, Eli, is terrorists may be buying our credits, and so if we do not abide by money transmitter laws and know your customer laws, we may be facilitating terrorism or illegal transactions, and we're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed. It's unfortunate. So you have to go through a lot of hoops to do that kind of thing.
Really, that's weird.
It's crazy.
I guess then why do you use the token system? Why don't you just use an iTunes system where you get your 20%, whoever's selling the thing gets their 80 and go on?
So it's the only way to do it decentralized. And we actually, as a company, because Library is a company, we may provide centralized ways to pay people. So if you
Yeah.
don't, we can just if we want to take a credit card and hand someone $5, we may decide to do that to make, but is not decentralized, right? And we want to, as much as possible, design a system. You know, who's the guy who said, right, power corrupts
Yeah.
and absolute power corrupts absolutely, or whatever. I think Lord Acton, maybe is his name, something like that.
Yeah.
Some past British dude. The more power we leave in our hands,
Yeah.
the more vulnerable library is down the road to not being what we want it to be. We want this to be the entire purpose of this is essentially to tie our own hands, to create a system where you can reliably trust
Yeah.
that there won't be someone else in charge other than the users. And so, sure, we could do centralized payments, but then you're back on relying on us again. And the goal behind this system has been to create one where you don't have to do that.
Well, I guess that brings up the interesting question because whenever you get into this stuff, you always get in that whole slippery slope. So, how do you decide when vanity URLs need to be decided by you, but
But we
something?
don't.
Okay, no.
That's what I'm saying. That's why we did that system of essentially like voting by credit or
Yeah.
we never destroy anything, but that was, let me tell you, an incredible amount of time thinking about this. Like how do I in a decentralized way allocate URLs, and how do I maximize that those URLs end up in the hands of the people who deserve them?
Yeah.
That was the thought process behind this system.
I see. I see. Okay. And then, okay, so you've got all this stuff. Then how do you, again, talking about laws and all that, how do you protect intellectual property? How do you not turn into mega, basically?
Well, how does HTTP protect intellectual property?
Yeah, but you're building this thing.
People build HTTP.
Yeah.
Human beings built HTTP,
Yeah,
right?
but Pirate Bay got dragged to court.
Pirate Bay got dragged to court, but BitTorrent is not an illegal technology.
Yeah.
So, as a corporation that operates in the United States, we have to and are interested in complying with United States laws, which means complying with things like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and the Communications Decency Act. And in terms of software that we release and services that we provide, we will be 100% in full compliance. We will do everything right.
Yeah.
And we're interested in doing everything right. We don't want people to be using the network to pirate content. At the same time, we only have so much control over the network, and there are trade-offs in this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
For us to have the ability to censor content on the network, we are then means that that means you also can't trust us down the road. It means that we're in a position to become YouTube again, to become these other companies who once they have been successful, then change their mind about how open they're going to be and how much they're going to be a platform that supports free speech and user choice, and they become a place that has their own narrative and has their own things that they want to push, and they use their power to do that.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to tie our hands up front and make that impossible to do at any point in time.
You don't think at some point the Justice Department is just going to squish you then? Like, because I think about, like, there was that one company that did encryption and they encrypted all the mail, and then they were asininely stupid and they had like one encryption key for the entire server. But at the end of the day, the Justice Department just came in and grabbed their entire server. I mean,
Yeah. So I find these things incredibly difficult to predict. There was a case a year, I don't know, maybe it was a year or two ago. Aereo, this company Aereo?
the wireless, yeah,
They did TV antennas.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they would buy you and they would buy individual antennas.
yeah.
Okay, so every single person that used their service owned their own antenna. They weren't pool sharing antennas. You owned an antenna, and they would then stream that antenna to your computer.
Yeah.
And the courts had previously held that it was perfectly legal. I can, as an individual, buy an antenna, set up an antenna, and stream that to myself. Perfectly legal. There had already been established rulings on this.
Yeah.
Okay, so then a company said, let's do this in mass. We'll buy a bunch of antennas. We will sell them to people. They will own their own antenna,
Yeah.
and we're going to stream it for them. And then the court said, oh, you're a cable company. And they said the doctrine that they used here was, you're a cable company not because you're a cable company in the ways that any your service actually works. You're a cable company because people perceive you to be a cable company, and that's what makes you one. I was shocked by this ruling. I thought for sure Aereo was going to be on the right side of the line.
Yeah.
And so the truth is, these cases get decided in somewhat unpredictable ways. We've worked with the lawyers from the beginning of this. We think we're on the right side of the line. We've done the things that other legal technologies have done.
Yeah.
At the same time, I find the ways that the Justice Department chooses to prosecute people to be personally very unpredictable. However, I certainly, like, my very first questions are always like, so like, I definitely can't go to jail, right? I have gotten a very firm ruling that the worst case scenario for us is basically that we would potentially have to surrender profits and things like that if they did regard us to be liable for usage of the network.
Okay.
But the law has been pretty clear that if you're developing a technology in an open standard, it's the users that are responsible for how they use it. All
Okay.
right. The Bitcoin is not an illegal technology. BitTorrent is not an illegal technology. People do illegal things with those technologies, no different than a gun or a knife.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
People do illegal things with guns and knives. Making guns and knives is not illegal. So, we are creating a technology, and then a gun and a knife are technology too.
Yeah, yeah.
We're creating a technology. We don't, if people do illegal things with it, they are responsible for that. We do not want them to do illegal things with it, but we're not responsible for how they use it.
That's interesting. Wonder how that'll work out because yeah, with so many of the other things, they find that central weak point, and then again, like I say,
Yeah,
Pirate Bay is just a
right.
freaking search engine for BitTorrent. Like there's no reason that should have gone to court, but it did.
Well, but the courts have held it. So, and similarly, if we provide search services ourselves, we will filter those search services. The case law is clear. If
Yeah.
you're a search engine, Google has to filter their search result.
Okay.
So if we act as a search engine, we will be filtering our results. We are legally obligated to do that.
That's right. So this is a protocol, and you have a product, but it's a test product to show how it works. So if somebody wanted to actually start building their own platform or infrastructure with what you have, how would they go about doing that then?
If You can go onto our GitHub. All the code is on GitHub. GitHub's like a source repository, so all of our source code is on there. You could probably find the binaries on there as well, like the executables, if you're a smart guy. If you are actually interested in building in that way, in a serious way, the number one thing that you could do is to join our Slack channel. We have like a chat channel.
Okay.
That's at slack.lbry.io. If you join the dev channel, you can interact with us. You can ask questions. We'll talk to you. We've already had code contributions from, I think, over 30 people. Now there's 5 actual employees working on LBRY.
Yeah.
So a lot of the code contributions have already come from the public, and we love public engagement with the service and the product. It's all open source. It's not just open source, it's MIT licensed, which is the most permissive license. And you could copy the LBRY code and start your own business on it tomorrow, and you don't even have to ask permission from us.
Real.
So it's literally as permissive as possible. That is sort of the ideals behind the company, is that people we support that kind of way of doing things, and so we're trying to lead by example in terms of how we do things.
So I guess that's a question then. If you're so permissively open source, at the end of the day, how do you plan to make any money off this thing?
We're keeping a lot of the exchanges do happen in LBRY credits. LBRY credits are used to reserve space in the catalog, and we own 10% of those. So 10 or we're keeping 10% for profit. Okay. So the business model is and we haven't spent any of these. We haven't sold any to the public. You see a lot of these new coins and stuff, and they want to sell their coins to the public and get a bunch of money up front. We haven't done that at all. We won't be doing that in the near future. We're funded for about a year, and our goal is to continue to be funded by people and not sell credits to the public. But we are a business. We have a lot of smart people working for the company. We are trying to make money off of this eventually. I think that's important for it to be successful. Yeah. If there's not an incentive for a group of people to be stewards to keep this going, then it won't be able to compete, as things continue to evolve. Yeah. But we think the portion that we've taken is very reasonable, and we don't think it's excessive or anything like that.
So when you're so permissively open source, what I always wonder is, I mean, again, the tech industry is just fucking nasty. It's brutal, and two, you got a lot of rich people running around. Like, how do you prevent somebody with $10 million from just taking your GitHub repository, giving it to coders that you can't afford, and just
Well, so one, we would hope that people would pick us because that we're the people who are kind of leading by example and doing this stuff the right way. But the other is there are network effects. So as more and more people use LBRY, well, okay, I can copy the code, but that doesn't copy the data. that doesn't put new when someone goes to publish to library, that's not going to make it on my that's not going to make it onto my library clone.
Yeah.
So there becomes a sort of effect where if library is the most popular way of doing things, why would I switch to the library alternative? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But hey, if people can copy it and make something better, we're not going to stop them. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, if some company wants to throw $100 million at library, they'd probably try to hire us or buy us anyway. Now that's not what we're inclined to do,
Yeah.
but it's they're not gonna. I think it's unlikely that a company would come along and just try to duplicate what we're doing without at least talking to us or that kind of thing. So.
So with this, I mean, I guess it's open source, but with all the intellectual property issues nowadays, like when you get into an area where a lot of people have been working on it for a while, I mean, you just run into patent problems and IP. How do you keep yourself from running into issues? Like, because you're doing so many things, it seems like you could very easily step on somebody else's work.
Yeah, it's tough. It's very tough to get even an affirmative statement that it's the same kind of thing. It's crazy, right? Like I would have had if there's not even an amount of money you can pay, right? Like I can't get an affirmative judgment
Huh.
that everything we're doing is legal and acceptable. I'd be happy to pay. Hey, if I'd pay six figures for that
Yeah.
because we're spending a lot of money building this thing. It would be terrible if 2 years from now we find out, oh, we weren't allowed to do it. But you can't do it. Literally, the only way you can find out if something is legal or not is to do it and then find out. And to me, it's crazy
Yeah.
that you can't get an affirmative judgment, but you can't.
Uh,
And so we just kind of see what happens. As far as I can tell, we were basically the first people to do this.
okay.
There are now one or two other companies that are kind of trying to do the same thing, but we're way ahead. We're the only ones that actually have a product out.
Yeah.
And uh, yeah, I mean, to the best of our understanding, we're in the clear. But then you get cases like Google got sued for having four black round corners, and evidently that was something that Apple owned. So it's like you never know. You can't know. It's sad. It's as an entrepreneur, I have so many ideas for businesses and so many things I think are possible, and it's crazy to me that it's the only answer is, well, work your ass off for 3 years or for 5 years or 10 years and then see what happens. That's
See,
the only thing you can do.
see if you get sued. Oh, lovely. So then we were talking before. So you've gotten about $500,000 in funding.
Hmm.
So I guess one of my questions is, as I hang out in the startup world and I hear a lot of stupid ideas, they get a lot of money. So that's actually like normal people think $500,000 is a lot of money, but in the startup world, it's a shockingly small amount. So why? I mean, because it seems like a good as long as the product works, it seems like a good idea. So why only 500,000 at this point?
I think you're selling something when you take money. You're
Yeah,
selling the company. You're selling equity in the company. And the farther along that you can get
yeah,
before you do that, the better of a deal you're going to get.
no way.
So if we think this is enough money to kind of get us to the next stage, this is enough money to allow us to continue to prove out the idea. If we had tried to raise $3 million right now,
Yeah,
we'd end up with that much less. And everyone in the company believes in this idea. And so we want to hold on to as much of it as we can. We want to get as far as we can ourselves. And I mean, we've got the kind of roster of people working for this company. Almost all of them would be making six figures if they were working on the open market.
yeah,
And all of them are taking discounts they're working for basically at least a third or about a third of what they could be making.
yeah, yeah.
But that's because they believe in this idea and they want to make this idea work. And we want to retain ownership of this idea. By taking the deals that we did, we still own the vast, vast majority of the company. We're not, our investors are smart people, so we listen to them for that reason.
Yeah.
But they're not in control of the company. We are. The employees of Library are in control of the company.
Interesting. So then, where were you able to find those investors? Did you go to VC meetups or something, or what did you do?
It's actually, I certainly did plenty of outreach, and there are people that I contacted, but actually the firm that ended up leading our round contacted us.
Really?
So we've gotten enough traction and awareness that they noticed us and they reached out to us.
So
But it's firms around Boston.
yeah,
We're in the Boston area.
okay. Yeah.
It's places from around here.
So how long have you been working on this for then?
Technically, the first code was written over 2 years ago. I myself only really started dialing up my involvement about a year ago, and I only started working full time in July.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so that's been going pretty quick then. And so you're in the Boston area. Is that just where everybody was, or is there something particular about Boston?
It's funny. I moved up here actually because the two other people who were the first people involved with the company were in this area.
Oh, cool, cool. And then I guess the final thing, my question is, how do you do stat? Do you do or how do you do stats like statistics, like how many downloads or any of that kind of information?
Yeah, so right now it's super crude, right? Like
It's
we shipped in July because I'm from the MVP school of get out that minimum viable product as soon as possible. If
yeah,
it so we shipped the bare bones implementation of library, which was like, oh, I can access a piece of content and it streams. It's like, great, let's get it out.
yeah,
Let's 'cause that's how you get this feedback from the public. You keep iterating, you keep building, right? Like we did that AMA, and quite frankly, some people didn't like some of our answers. But what if we hadn't? We would have been doing the wrong thing for another 3 months or another 6 months. You get out there, you learn, you collect the feedback. I think the idea of what we're trying to build is something that everyone would, not everyone, but the vast majority of people would agree with. Like,
yeah,
let's leave the people who make stuff in charge. Let's leave the creators in charge. Let's leave the users in charge. Let's not have people in the middle deciding what people can access and purchase. Let's leave that up to individuals.
yeah.
And that's our end goal. And that's what we have to, continue to push things out, learn from our experiences, and keep evolving and iterating until we reach that goal. Actually, I feel like I started ranting there and lost track of the original question, but if I didn't answer it, please repeat.
No, no, it's just about stats and the very
Oh,
so
yes,
yeah,
the answer is we don't have them. That was
yeah,
my long-winded answer of like, we can tell you specifically how many people have purchased your video.
yeah, yeah,
It's basically watches. That's it. There's
yeah.
no analytics tools. We
Okay.
have, we just don't. We're not matching that yet. So.
And then I guess so. You keep saying streaming. So is it download and watch or actual streaming?
It's either. You can, oh yeah, you can stream. Yeah, you don't have to download the whole thing. And that's another improvement versus BitTorrent. You can stream on top of BitTorrent. It's kind of antisocial in terms of how the protocol works. It's like it's a little rude. But library is designed from the ground up to support streaming. So
Okay. And then with library, because we do like with YouTube, there's multi-bit rate encoding, so you don't do that at all. It's just one file goes up. So if you decide to do a 4K 120 frame per second file, that's your business.
it's absolutely your business now. And again, that's another thing that we anticipate. Like, we can support. Oh, okay, here's 4 copies of this file, and then you can switch between them.
Yeah.
It's not something we support currently. But it's feasible to do.
All right.
It's a lot of building to do still, if you can't tell, Eli.
It's, but then I guess that's one question though. Like I say, because you start thinking like 4K, 60 frames per second. Is there whether or not you've run into it is there a theoretical size limit? Like I wouldn't go over 20 gigs if I were you.
There's probably like a theoretical size limit from the perspective of like physics or the universe. There's
Yeah.
not one encoded into the protocol. If you want to upload something that's some 2 terabyte,
Really.
12 million K pixel, yeah, sure, go ahead, try. I mean, well, actually, realistically, if you threw a couple terabytes at it right now, it probably wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But like, it's not. There's not a hard coded limit. There's not a real reason that couldn't work.
Okay. And so, okay, so I guess the final question then would be, so if I want to upload my library, because like for somebody like me, I've got 1,000 videos. They're all long form. It's terabytes of data.
We're providing tools for this. So
Okay.
we're actually, and in fact, this is part of our recruitment right now, is we're trying to reach out to YouTubers who
Yeah.
find this idea appealing, who want to essentially work with us in the early stages, because you are very much, we want this to work for you.
Yeah.
I watched a couple episodes of your show, and like, you're the exact kind of person who we want to make this service work for.
Okay.
And so we're building tools to make people like you kind of satisfied by that onboarding experience.
All
So.
right. Well, is it so I have my, let's say, 4 terabytes of data. Will it just slowly replicate up into the cloud as because I guess that's my main question is this could get overloaded real quick if you have 20 people who've done 5 or 10 videos and then you have 2 people like me that dump like 5,000 videos onto the
Yeah.
network.
So we make sure the way the incentives work, there's as more content gets on there, there's more incentive for the more space to be available
Yeah.
if necessary. we don't want to do anything special, anyone that anyone can't do. But if necessary, we can run nodes ourselves, right? We monitor the health of the network. That wouldn't be any unique position because again, we're really hard. We want to try really hard to avoid that.
Yeah.
But we can run the same piece of software that anyone else can use. So
Yeah.
if we really saw that the network was filling up and the people weren't responding to the increasing incentives to make their space available, then we could help out. So.
Oh, well, sounds good. So when do you, again, startup world, about when do you feel like there's like a real product that people will be happy to use?
Oh my gosh, happy. We're trying to get out the not. We want to get rid of that user gate by early December 17. I'm
Okay.
sorry, by early 2017.
Yeah.
And however, I would really encourage people to sign up now. The earlier you sign up, we are kind of giving some like initial user rewards, some kind of free credits on the network.
Yeah.
So if you find this idea interesting, do sign up now. We'll let you know as soon as it's publicly available.
Okay.
And if you're a clever person, you could dig around and possibly figure out how to get it now. But do understand you're in for an experience that is not going to change your life. You'll find it interesting, but it's not going to change your life.
Okay. So if they do grab that, what operating systems does it work on?
It's on Windows, OS X, and Ubuntu,
Oh,
and Linux. It's
Linux.
only packaged for Ubuntu. So there's a deb, there's a PKG, and there's an MSI for the respective operating systems. So.
Cool deal. So that's about all my questions then. Do you have any like final thoughts for the folks at home?
Uh, if you like this idea, please join us. Like really, like this is not an idea that will happen unless the people who find this idea interesting, who like the idea of normal people being in control of what they watch and what they access, like we need you. It won't happen without you. So please like come and join us, hang out in our Slack channel, you can email me directly. I'm very available. I really like getting engaged with the people who this resonates with. So like please kind of join us in helping us build this thing.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Eli.
Yep. See you later.